In April of 2018, former Texas University student Shauna Elliott appeared at the Hays County Justice Center and was jailed for 14 years for a drunk driving accident that resulted in the death of a man and his unborn child. On August 2nd of 2016, Elliott drank copious amounts of alcohol while spending the day with friends floating down the river at the Texas State Tubes. In spite of the fact that a few months prior she'd been arrested for meth and heroin possession, the drunk college senior then got behind the wheel of her Chevy Impala and drove down Highway 21. Simultaneously, 5 months pregnant Christian Guerrero was traveling from the opposite direction with her husband, 23-year-old Fabian, as a passenger. Elliott swerved into oncoming traffic and collided head-on with Guerrero's vehicle. Fabian died at the scene while Christian suffered a brain bleed and other injuries that led to the loss of her baby. Pictures taken after the accident showed that the right side of the Guerrero's vehicle had been completely destroyed. In the crash's immediate aftermath, a responding officer's dashcam captured Elliott struggling to walk during field sobriety tests, which she ultimately failed. Elliott, who was wearing bikini bottoms and a tank top, was heard sobbing and telling the officer, "Kill me now, please, I just want them to be okay." She didn't sustain serious injuries in the crash but was taken to a hospital where her BAC was measured at .199, whereas the legal limit in Texas was .08. Upon being interviewed further, Elliott told law enforcement that the Guerreros had also been drinking at the river and tried to blame them for the crash. She also reportedly made unsubstantiated claims to her boyfriend that the couple had cartel ties. Elliott ultimately pleaded guilty to intoxication assault and 2 counts of intoxication manslaughter. Christian spoke during her sentencing to make sure she received the harshest possible punishment. The woman told Elliott, "I spent the past year and 7 months thinking about what I would say to you. You're a monster." Christian added, "You have shown you're incapable of remorse. I don't buy your crocodile tears or the sweet little innocent girl they try to portray you to be." Number 6. Tyler Boebert. In late February of 2024, a Colorado teenager was arrested in the town of Rifle and faced 22 charges for various offenses, including several felony charges for criminal possession of ID documents. 18-year-old Tyler Boebert, son of Colorado Congresswoman Lauren Boebert, was connected to a string of vehicle trespasses and property thefts. Boebert and several others broke into at least 4 cars in the town of Rifle and stole wallets to make purchases at various businesses, including gas stations, McDonald's, and Starbucks. One of the theft victims was a woman suffering from a brain tumor who was left with only $75 in her account and thus was unable to pay for surgery. Updates from April of 2024 indicated that Boebert, who shared a son with an ex-girlfriend, was still in the process of finding a lawyer he could afford. Boebert's mother, a representative of Colorado's 3rd Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives, spoke of his legal troubles to say, "As an adult and father, Tyler will take responsibility for his actions and should be held accountable for poor decisions just like any other citizen." Number 5. Alicia Brea. In a twisted bid to win back her ex's affection, Florida teen Alicia Brea sent him a photo of herself apparently harming their child in May of 2024. The Hollywood woman was angry after having broken up with her boyfriend earlier in the day on May the 9th. The 18-year-old snapped a photo that showed her stomping on her boy's face and sent it to a friend as well as to her ex. The friend called the Broward County Sheriff's Office and deputies went to Brea's home. They found the child unharmed and, after searching the teen's phone, came upon the photo. The boy was wearing the same outfit at the scene as he was in the image. Brea revealed that her actions stemmed from her wanting to know if she could get her ex to come back to her, and also explained that she'd sent the man additional photos to prove she'd never harmed their child. Brea was arrested on a cruelty charge and taken to the Broward County Jail, where her boy was placed with Child Protective Services. Updates from mid-May indicated that she was released on a $20,000 bond and ordered by the judge to wear a GPS monitor and to not have any contact with her child. Number 4. Andrea Yee. A Maryland teenager was arrested in the spring of 2024 after law enforcement was alerted to write-ins in which he stated an intention of shooting up a school in order to become famous. 18-year-old Andrea Yee, who went by Alex and used male pronouns, wrote a 129-page manifesto which was seen by an unnamed witness. Parts of the writings were fictionalized, with the main character being James Wang, who was transgender. The witness believed that many aspects of the character's life, particularly him being bullied at school and planning mass violence in retaliation, were directly taken from Ye's real-world experience and not fiction. The witness thus became concerned that Ye was going to imminently act upon the mass shooting that was planned and strategized in his writings. The target was Wootton High School in Rockville, which Ye attended via a virtual program and hadn't been on campus since 2022. The FBI examined the manifesto and alerted Montgomery County Police. Investigators obtained a search warrant that led them to concerning drawings, documents, conversations, and internet searches authored by Ye in which he threatened or planned mass violence. The teen had at one point told an online user, "My homicidal ideation has been getting worse lately to the point I might act on it eventually," with the mentioning, "I'd want to kill a lot of people or it wouldn't be worth it." He also made Google searches for gun ranges in his area. Ye was arrested and charged with threats of mass violence, carrying a potential prison sentence of 10 years. As of late April of 2024, he was ordered to be held without bond. Court documents seen by ABC detailed how Ye had a history of mental health issues and that he'd been hospitalized after threatening to shoot up a school in the past. A counselor who'd worked with him revealed that he smiled while expressing thoughts of mass violence. Number 3. Edwin Estrada. On July the 29th of 2014, it only took a jury in Bergen County, New Jersey 90 minutes to find 22-year-old Edwin Estrada guilty of murder and multiple related charges for a brutal attack he'd carried out in July of 2010. Estrada, who was at the time 18 years old, broke into the Fairview apartment of 88-year-old World War II veteran Vincent Luizzi with the intention of robbing him. Luizzi, a retired mason and bricklayer, had reportedly dozed off while watching television. Estrada grabbed a cooking pot and repeatedly struck him in the head with enough force to cause multiple fractures and depressions in his skull. The elderly veteran succumbed to the extensive head trauma 9 days later. Estrada was arrested in New York City a few days after the incident. In January of 2013, he admitted aggravated manslaughter under a plea deal which would have capped his prison time at 27 years. The deal was vacated by a judge at the objection of Luizzi's relatives. Estrada had refused to take full responsibility for the full beating, as he claimed that his judgment was impaired by marijuana and PCP. He claimed that he'd become paranoid and heard the devil's voice urging him to kill Luizzi. A Bergen County jury, the judge, and the prosecution's psychiatric expert dismissed those claims. In July of 2014, he was convicted on multiple counts that included murder, burglary, weapons offenses, and robbery. Estrada, a military high school dropout, maintained the remorselessness that had been characteristic of him throughout the legal proceedings. He had virtually no reaction when the verdict was read in court. He was subsequently sentenced to 60 years in state prison. Today's topic was requested by Jerome Clooney 1400 and Tamika Davis 6641. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comment section below. Number 2. Thomas Betteridge. At around 1 a.m. on August the 3rd of 2023, 2 youths were involved in a deadly altercation in the square in Bournemouth, England. As the brawl unfolded, Thomas Betteridge attacked 18-year-old Cameron Hamilton with a knife. The stabbing was captured on CCTV. Law enforcement arrived on the scene within seconds of the attack and pronounced Hamilton dead at the scene. The 5-inch knife used by Betteridge was supplied by fellow teenager Lenny Hansen. Betteridge, who was under the influence of cocaine and alcohol at the time of the attack, was reported to have boasted to Hansen that he'd shanked and sliced up Hamilton. Body cam footage would show them being arrested in the killing's wake, with Betteridge feigning surprise upon learning that he'd been charged with murder. The 18-year-old claimed self-defense at Bournemouth Crown Court and was ultimately cleared of murder. Following a 21-day trial, he was instead found guilty of manslaughter and knife possession. He was jailed for 9 years in April of 2024. Judge William Moosley was quoted as saying during the sentencing hearing, "I have concluded the use of the knife was wholly unnecessary in the face of the threat he felt." Hansen was also convicted of possessing a bladed article and scheduled to be sentenced in May. Stick around after number 1 in case you've not yet seen our video about when the rich and famous go wrong. It's coming up right after this. Number 1. Mary Jean Conniff. On May the 5th of 2014, a runway model in her early 20s was caught trying to shoplift Pop-Tarts, a cake and cake mix from a supermarket in Harlem, New York City. A Pathmark worker had observed Mary Jean Conniff taking the products and concealing them in her purse and pockets. She was allowed to leave the store, after which she was stopped by a security guard who alerted the police. Conniff, who appeared at the fall 2012 Victor de Souza fashion show, was arrested for petty larceny. In June, during a hearing at Manhattan Criminal Court, Conniff pleaded guilty and agreed to 1 day of community service. As she exited the courthouse, she reportedly declined to comment and rolled her eyes at a reporter. Provided she remained out of legal trouble for the 6 months that followed, her charge would be reduced to a violation, with her criminal case sealed. Commenting on the incident, the worker who'd caught the 6-foot model in the act was quoted as telling the New York Post, "I don't want to judge her, but maybe she needed it," adding, "Maybe she was hungry and had a sweet tooth." Renee Allway, a 2007 America's Top Model finalist, saw a dramatic fall from grace when she was arrested in Palm Springs, California, in June of 2013 for multiple criminal charges, including burglary, vehicle theft, fraud, and drug possession. After being spotted acting suspiciously in a neighborhood by local residents, she was allegedly found hiding in the garage of a condominium unit with a firearm. Another armed man was rumored to have been with her. A SWAT team was brought in for the standoff, which lasted 6 hours. After her arrest, she appeared in court with a shaved head. Her sister told the media that it was her way of starting over. She went on to plead guilty to 4 felony burglary counts, possession of a firearm, and vehicle theft. Initially sentenced to 12 years in prison for her crimes, she was dismissed under a plea agreement of more than a dozen additional counts. She spent 5 years behind bars and was released in 2018. Number 6. Jeremy Meeks. Before Jeremy Meeks made headlines for a famous police mugshot, he was an active member of the Crips gang and was involved in grand theft and possession of a firearm, for which he was convicted on federal charges in 2014. Born in 1984, his life in crime started young, as Meeks was first arrested at 18 for assaulting a 16-year-old boy and sentenced to 2 years in a California prison. Following his most recent arrest in 2014, he gained viral recognition for his good looks as the hot felon and was signed to a modeling agency following his release in 2016. In 2017, he made his runway debut. Since then, he has secured multiple modeling gigs and has managed to stay on the right side of the law. Number 5. Salma Al-Shimi. Salma Al-Shimi, an Egyptian model and Instagram influencer, was detained by the authorities in 2020, along with her photographer, for allegedly disrespecting Egyptian culture. She'd posed for a photo shoot just outside the city of Cairo, in front of the 4,007-year-old step pyramid of Zoser. Local media reported she was wearing an inappropriate costume after appearing in a video in ancient Egyptian dress. Shimi denied being aware of the rules she'd supposedly broken, leading to her arrest, and many citizens criticized the courts. Many questioned the legitimacy of banning normal photos at an archaeological site. Shimi and her photographer were later released on bail in order to pay 500 Egyptian pounds each, which is about $32 US. Egypt is known to take allegations of inappropriate social media use very seriously. In 2021, 5 young women were sentenced to 2 years in prison for posting videos perceived as indecent on the popular app TikTok. Number 4. Hluskova. At just 22 years old, Czech model Teresa Hluskova faced a sentence of 8 years behind bars. She was arrested in January of 2018 after she was found attempting to smuggle close to 20 pounds of heroin, worth nearly $1.5 million, into Ireland. She was caught before her departure at Islamabad International Airport in Pakistan and reportedly broke down in tears during her court hearing. Hluskova claimed that someone else had placed the contraband inside her luggage without her knowledge, and that she was tricked into entering Pakistan through a fake modeling opportunity. However, following a lengthy trial in which 9 witnesses were called forward, she was ultimately convicted of drug trafficking According to her legal team, she went on to launch appeals against her sentence. Subsequent media reports claim that these attempts have failed and she is said to still be imprisoned in Pakistan. Number 3. Sky Ferreira and Zachary Cole Smith. In 2013, a model couple was pulled over after committing several vehicle and traffic infractions in the state of New York. At the time, Zachary Cole Smith, who is also the frontman of an indie rock band, was driving an unregistered truck without insurance or a license. The truck also had a stolen license plate. Between him and girlfriend Sky Ferreira, they allegedly were found in possession of heroin and ecstasy. Ferreira was also said to have resisted arrest by physically fighting the police officers attempting to detain her. Only a few hours earlier, the 21-year-old had walked alongside Cara Delevingne at a Marc Jacobs show for the New York Fashion Week. The couple was released from jail on bail with a $2,500 fine for Smith and a $1,500 fine for Ferreira. Ferreira later denied allegations by critics that she was a negative influence on her fans, saying she'd never really been clean and pure. Number 2. Reeva Steenkamp. Reeva Steenkamp rose to fame as the face of Avon Cosmetics. Having attended and graduated law school, she was praised for her work ethic and was a prominent advocate for women's rights and victims of sexual assault. Steenkamp met a tragic and violent demise in 2013. Her partner, Olympic star Oscar Pistorius, who was famed for his running feats on 2 prosthetic legs, shot her 4 times in their shared home. The story made news headlines worldwide. Pistorius claims to this day that he'd mistaken her for an intruder in their home, but his former partner, amongst others, claimed he had a history of violent behavior. He was sentenced to 6 years in prison, which was later extended to 15 years, minus his time served. Number 1. Isabel Caro. Modeling is often regarded as one of the most physically and mentally demanding careers, and Isabel Caro was a victim of one of the most common afflictions in the industry. A French-born model and actress, Caro had suffered from anorexia since the age of 13 and rose to prominence after allowing an Italian advertising campaign to feature her severely malnourished body to raise awareness about the disease. In the process, she became the international face of anorexia. She was later a judge on the French version of America's Next Model. During her shoot for the Italian ad campaign, she weighed just 60 pounds at 5 foot 4 inches, which is around the same weight as a large microwave oven. Caro was pressured by her mother not to gain weight during childhood. Her mother also prevented her from interacting with other children as a way of sheltering her from any contagious diseases. Isabel Caro tragically passed away in November of 2010 at the age of 28. Her anorexia and the damage it had wrought on her body over the years were cited as a main factor in her death. Number 7. Amy Locane. Amy Locane is a former actress who achieved mainstream success in the early 1990s, starring in films like Crybaby and School Ties, as well as in the first season of the primetime soap opera Melrose Place. Locane got engaged to businessman Mark Bovenizer in 2007, with whom she had 2 daughters. On June the 27th of 2010 in Montgomery, New Jersey, Locane was driving her car at 53 miles per hour in an area for which speed was restricted at 35. She crashed into a vehicle driven by Fred Seaman, who was traveling at 3 miles per hour as he'd made a left-hand turn in front of Locane to enter his driveway. Seaman's wife, 60-year-old Helene, was killed in the collision. Testing revealed that Locane's blood alcohol levels were almost 3 times over the legal limit. She was convicted of vehicular homicide and, in early 2013, ordered to serve only 3 years in prison, with a judge factoring the welfare of her children into his decision. After she was released from prison in 2015, her husband filed for divorce and the custody of their 2 children. A New Jersey Court of Appeals would subsequently review her initial sentence and deemed it to have been too lenient. Double jeopardy, the procedural defense by which a person can't be tried twice for the same crime, didn't apply because she'd already served her sentence and parole term. In September of 2020, she was resentenced to 8 years in prison, of which she'd have to serve a minimum of 6 before being eligible for parole. Number 6. Jacqueline McKee. Jacqueline McKee, an adult actress who performed as Foxy Jackie, was arrested in 2010 for assaulting her husband at their home in Memphis, Tennessee. Jacqueline, a woman in her late 20s, was no stranger to controversy and had made headlines about 2 years prior for filming adult content for her website in public places. It's believed that she and her husband Justin were in the process of getting a divorce when the man went to retrieve some belongings from their shared Cordova residence. The couple got into an argument and Jacqueline, who was texting at the time, shoved her phone into Justin's face. She then reportedly pushed the man, kicked him in the head, and scratched his back. The police arrived at the home and Jacqueline was taken away in handcuffs. She was charged with domestic assault, bodily harm, and later released from Shelby County Jail. Number 5. Cindy Taylor. Adult film actress Cindy Taylor, an inductee into the industry's Hall of Fame, was arrested in February of 2020 for beating up her boyfriend. The man awoke to find Taylor, better known to those familiar with her work as Jessie Jane, throwing away his medication. Earlier in the night, the couple had been sharing drinks at the address in Moore, Oklahoma. The argument escalated after he confronted her. Taylor would later claim that she'd flown into a fit of rage because her boyfriend had actually been taking oral anabolic steroids. The police responded to a call of domestic disturbance and found them in the driveway. Taylor had violently attacked her boyfriend, whose left eye had been swollen shut and who was bleeding from a deep bite mark on his hand. She told officers that the man had initiated the physical altercation by grabbing her by the neck and throwing her in a wall. She didn't, however, have any injuries, and the police found her story questionable. Taylor was arrested and charged with domestic violence but has since been released. Number 4. Molly Fitzgerald. In December of 2019, actress Molly Fitzgerald was arrested in Olathe, Kansas, and charged with second-degree murder for fatally stabbing her mother, 68-year-old Patricia. Molly, aged 38, had a minor role in Captain America: The First Avenger, a project for which she was also the director's assistant, and had additionally directed, produced, and starred in several other productions of a lower budget. The fatal stabbing occurred on December the 20th. Molly, who'd recently moved back in with her parents, would tell the authorities that Patricia had come at her with the knife and that she'd acted in self-defense. Once she'd taken control of the knife, Molly claimed that she was forced to stab Patricia because she kept trying to take it from her. It was a version of events seemingly unsupported by the post-mortem examination. Patricia, who had been stabbed 4 times in the back, also had defensive injuries in the form of cuts on both her hands, and her thumb had nearly been sliced off. There was also bruising on her face and around her neck, suggesting attempted strangulation. Molly chose to act as her own attorney in the matter, and her trial is ongoing, as is the investigation, which may produce further revelations into why she'd killed her mother. Number 3. Tucker Reed. In 2018, Aileen Tucker Moore Reed starred in an independent horror film called From the Dark, under the name Win Reed. A scene showed her character, Valerie Faust, shooting someone dead at a remote Oregon property. It turned out to be a grim example of art imitating real-life events, as the day after wrapping up, Reed was arrested for fatally shooting her uncle at her parents' home in Oregon. The incident dated back to a few years prior, and the studio claimed to have been unaware of Reed's legal problems right up to the point that she was officially arrested and charged. Producers argued that a low budget hadn't allowed for background checks. On July the 26th of 2016, Reed was meeting with her mother and grandmother, as well as a notary, over a property dispute with her maternal uncle, Shane Moore. He'd allegedly been pressuring Reed's grandmother into signing a deed, something that the actress and her mother didn't want her to do. The man had reportedly assaulted Reed in 2015, and she'd obtained a restraining order against him. Within roughly 10 seconds of arriving at the home, Moore was shot dead by Reed. She was charged with first and second-degree manslaughter, but her mother stated that she'd acted in self-defense. Reed was bailed out and went on to act in From the Dark under a modified name. At some point leading up to her 2018 arrest, the authorities managed to obtain footage from Reed's cell phone that they hadn't been able to recover during the initial investigation. It showed Moore through a window heading towards the front door and an enraged Reed shouting for someone to grab a gun.
As her mother confronted him, Reed, with her cell phone still in hand and without warning, shot Moore in the chest. A gunshot was heard in the audio, but the footage only showed the aftermath of Moore bleeding in the driveway. As panic overtook the women, a sobbing Reed was heard claiming that she'd merely meant to fire a warning shot and scare him. It was based on the footage that the actress was formally charged and subsequently sentenced to 6 years and 3 months after a 2020 deal in which she pleaded guilty to second-degree manslaughter. Earlier that same year, she'd been charged with supplying contraband and unlawfully possessing heroin while housed at the Jackson County Jail. Number 2. Felicia Pearson. Prior to her breakout and critically acclaimed performance in The Wire, a series in which she appeared from 2004 to 2008, Baltimore woman Felicia Pearson had had a troublesome past. Her mother was a crack addict who continued to abuse the drug while pregnant. Pearson was born severely underdeveloped and wasn't expected to live. She beat the odds and survived, but as a youth became involved with drugs as a dealer. In her late teens, Pearson was convicted of second-degree murder for fatally shooting teenager Okaya Tuma and was sentenced to 2 8-year terms. She was released in 2000 and several years later was introduced to the producers and writers of The Wire by Michael K. Williams, who played Omar Little. Pearson had met him at a Baltimore club. She went on to play the semi-fictional character of Felicia Snoop Pearson, and renowned novelist Stephen King would refer to her performance as perhaps the most terrifying female villain to ever appear in a television series. The role launched her acting career, which would include appearances in various hip-hop music videos, roles in Spike Lee films, and appearances on the 8th and 9th seasons of reality show Love and Hip Hop New York. Unfortunately, Pearson eventually fell back into her old ways. She and several others were arrested for drug offenses in March of 2011, following a DEA operation that resulted in the raid of her Baltimore home. In August, she pleaded guilty to the charges and was given a suspended 7-year prison term. Number 1. Aubrey Gold. From 2015 to 2018, American adult film actress Lauren Wombles, who performed as Aubrey Gold, appeared in dozens of adult films, and once she ended her career, she amassed a lengthy criminal record, mostly relating to drug offenses. However, in the summer of 2020, Wombles would face more serious charges in connection to the murder of Alabama man Raul Ambriz Guillen, aged 51. He was found buried in a shallow grave in Florida after being declared missing by his daughter since July the 4th. Her reports indicated that he'd called his ex-wife to let her know that he was in the company of dangerous people and that he needed to find a way out of the situation. He asked his ex for money, but she couldn't help him as she was in the process of moving at the time. Guillen had last been seen at the Graceville home of Jeremy Odell Peters, where he'd met with 23-year-old Wombles and her boyfriend, William Shane Parker, aged 35. The complex multi-county 2-state investigation that ensued could trace its inception to early May in Alabama. An unnamed woman who was roommates with Guillen went to the sheriff's office in Jackson County to report that she'd been abused by Parker. She would later state that she believed Guillen had been murdered but was unable to prove it. The connection was made, thus the authorities in Florida and Alabama collaborated in identifying Peters, Parker, and Wombles as suspects. Police got a warrant to search Peters' residence and a second home, in both of which they found evidence of murder. They then used cadaver dogs and traced Guillen's remains to a gravesite in the northeast of Holmes County. He died from a single gunshot wound to the back of the head. Parker was charged with open count of murder, Wombles with being a principal to murder, and Peters was charged as an accessory. Their trials are ongoing, as is the investigation, which could eventually produce more arrests.
Number 7. Inez Gomez Mont. In September of 2021, a Mexican news anchor went on the run with her husband after being accused of stealing millions of dollars from the Ministry of the Interior. A warrant for Inez Gomez Mont's arrest was issued by a federal judge on September the 10th, following an investigation into her financial dealings from 2016 to 2017. It was revealed that Gomez Mont and her husband, Victor Manuel Alvarez Puga, had embezzled roughly $146 million from the government's public resources
through nearly 1,500 banking operations with various shell companies. The couple consequently faced charges of money laundering, operations with resources of illicit origin, and embezzlement, which together carried a maximum sentence of 20 to 60 years in prison. On September the 14th, an anonymous former employee claimed that the pair had fled to the United States with their children. The Mexican Attorney General's office subsequently requested that Interpol issue red notices for Gomez Montt and Alvarez Puga, which would allow investigators to coordinate with foreign officials in their efforts to locate them. Gomez Montt has hosted a variety of Mexican talk shows since the start of her career in the late 1990s. She'd previously gained international attention for proposing to former New England Patriots quarterback Tom Brady at the media day for the 2008 Super Bowl. Number 6. Wallace Souza. In 2009, a popular Brazilian television presenter was accused of hiring hitmen to carry out various murders in a twisted effort to boost his program's ratings. The disquieting allegations were levied against Wallace Souza, a former elected member of the Legislative Assembly of Amazonas, who'd also long served as the host of a controversial news program called Canal Livre. Prior to branching out into broadcasting and politics, Souza had worked as a police officer but was fired from his position in 1987 after he was reportedly arrested for pension fraud and fuel theft. Canal Livre was launched 2 years later, and it quickly became a ratings success due to the graphic, hands-on nature of the investigative journalism being performed on the show. Souza regularly covered raids and arrests while also being known for following closely behind police chases in a helicopter. Suspicions began to arise concerning Souza's remarkable ability to arrive at crime scenes and gather footage before the advent of law enforcement. In response to mounting accusations of criminal activity, the host claimed that he and his team used police informants and radio scanners to stay updated on the latest crime scenes. However, the validity of his statements was called into question by the testimony of Moser Jorge da Costa, a former police officer. Da Costa alleged that Souza had tasked him with killing someone in order for the TV host to get to the scene of the crime before the authorities would become aware of the situation. A police investigation into the television presenter's seedy affairs was launched, and it emerged that he and his accomplices had arranged a total of 5 murders in their attempts to boost the show's viewership. Warrants for the arrest of Souza and his son were issued shortly thereafter. The disgraced host initially fled from justice before ultimately turning himself into the police on October the 9th of 2009. He was charged with murder, drug trafficking, intimidation of witnesses, illegal carrying of arms, and formation of a criminal gang. Souza wouldn't, however, face the punishment associated with his crimes. He reportedly suffered from a rare medical condition known as Budd-Chiari syndrome. The former TV show host went into cardiac arrest at a hospital in Sao Paulo, which ultimately led to his death. Number 5. Cami Rosler. A television news anchor was arrested for smashing a beer bottle over a man's head during a heated argument on September the 27th of 2020. The altercation, which reportedly took place in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, was sparked by a disagreement between 28-year-old Cami Rosler and a male acquaintance of hers as they were discussing politics. The pair was sitting outside with a larger group of people at about 4:30 p.m. when the dispute abruptly escalated. Rosler allegedly grabbed a glass bottle and swung it at the victim's head, leaving him with cuts on his face that required stitches to mend. According to a report by local police, Rosler, who served as a morning news anchor for WIS-TV in Columbia, South Carolina, was subsequently taken into custody and charged with aggravated assault. In the incident's wake, she was fired from her position. However, in January of 2021, she found employment at KXLT-TV in her home state of Minnesota. Number 4. Feven Kifel-Georgis. On March the 20th of 2021, a morning news anchor from Las Vegas was found in a rather compromising position by members of law enforcement. According to documents filed by local authorities, Feven Kifel-Georgis was passed out, unclothed, and emitted the potent stench of alcohol when police officers stopped her car on a residential street at around 7:30 in the morning. During the course of their interaction with the woman, the officers reportedly requested that she exit her vehicle. When she tried to comply with their instructions, Kifel-Georgis allegedly stumbled out onto the road, and the smell of alcohol became even stronger. The woman, who'd appeared on the Fox 5 Las Vegas news program every weekday since 2018, reportedly declined to submit to a blood test. Following her arrest, she was charged with reckless driving with disregard for the safety of a person or property. She also faced a $1,000 fine and was consequently required to attend driving school.
Kifle-Georges didn't appear on her regular television time slot for an entire week following her run-in with the police. Upon her return, she issued an on-air apology for her behavior and vowed to use the incident as a learning experience. Number 3. Chuck Barris. In an autobiography published in 1984, well-regarded television presenter Chuck Barris claimed that he'd worked as an assassin for the CIA. Barris had enjoyed a tremendously successful television career prior to writing his book. In addition to hosting the NBC-produced series The Gong Show, he also aided in the creation of The Dating Game and The Newlywed Game, both of which experienced extended runs on network television. Barris continued to thrive in the entertainment industry until the second half of the 1970s, during which many of the shows that he was closely involved with began posting decreased ratings figures. In 1980, the man formerly known as the King of Daytime TV made the decision to sell his production company for a reported $100 million. According to an article written for NBC News, Barris subsequently checked into a New York City hotel and proceeded to write his entire autobiography over the course of 2 months. Upon its publication in 1984, the television host faced widespread criticism for his assertions that he'd been living a double life as a CIA assassin during the 1960s and 70s. The intelligence agency itself denied having had any relationship with Barris. In 1984, on the Today Show, the TV anchor admitted to have made the whole story up, but in 2010, he left a seed of doubt in a different interview by saying, "I'll never say one way or the other." On March the 21st of 2017, Barris passed away of natural causes at his home in Palisades, New York. The 2003 film Confessions of a Dangerous Mind is based on his autobiography. Number 2. Suhaib Ilyasi. A former Indian television presenter faced a slew of legal repercussions in connection to the death of his wife, which culminated in him being sentenced to life in prison. In December of 2017, Suhaib Ilyasi rose to prominence during the 1990s as the host of the popular crime show India's Most Wanted. The series was credited with pioneering the crime-busting format on Indian television. Each episode of the program documented law enforcement's efforts to track down some of the country's most notorious criminals. The show's subject matter led to Ilyasi and his family regularly receiving death threats from members of the criminal underworld. In response to these threats, Ilyasi requested that local police assign 2 officers to guard his residence. On the night of January the 10th of 2000, Ilyasi reportedly told the constables patrolling his neighborhood that his wife had stabbed herself. After being transported to the hospital, the woman eventually passed away due to severe internal bleeding. Ilyasi faced criminal charges as a result of the fatal incident. According to court records, he was charged with mental harassment, destroying evidence, and dowry death. The latter meant that Ilyasi had driven his wife to take her own life by torturing her in pursuit of dowry money. Following a prolonged investigation, the allegations against the former television star were upgraded. Nearly 2 decades since his wife's death, Ilyasi was convicted of her murder by a Delhi court, and he was consequently sentenced to life imprisonment. The Delhi High Court acquitted him a year later, however, stating that the evidence against him was insufficient for the conviction to be sustained. Number 1. Paul Ballard. In August of 2021, a former children's television star was jailed for causing a fatal 8-vehicle accident in Essex, England. According to testimony presented during the case's legal proceedings, Paul Ballard, aged 39, had taken a significant amount of cocaine prior to getting behind the wheel of the car that ultimately instigated the accident. As he traveled on Squirrels Heath Road in Romford, Ballard suffered a seizure and lost control of the vehicle, which then accelerated to speeds of up to 104 miles per hour. The posted speed limit on that particular stretch of road was reportedly only 30 miles per hour. The oscillating trajectory of Ballard's car eventually led it directly into a vehicle driven by Eileen Haskell, aged 64. Ballard plowed into the back of Haskell's Ford Cougar while she was stopped at a red light. The collision triggered an 8-car pileup that not only claimed Haskell's life but also that of a 48-year-old schoolteacher named Richard Trezise. He, according to court records, was waiting at a bus stop at the time of the incident. After the ensuing police investigation, Ballard pleaded guilty to causing death by dangerous driving, and he was sentenced to 9 years in prison. The former co-presenter of the popular kids show Dig It also faced charges stemming from the alleged assault of a woman at a hotel. Ballard contested the allegations but was ultimately found guilty following a trial at the Chelmsford Crown Court. Number 8. Michael Jace. After beginning his professional acting career in 1992, Michael Jace appeared in small roles in films like Forrest Gump and Boogie Nights, before finally landing a job as a recurring member of the ensemble cast for the crime drama series The Shield in 2002. He appeared in 88 episodes of the show throughout its 7 seasons on the air. On May the 19th of 2014, police were called to Jace's South Los Angeles residence following a report of domestic violence. Jace himself had placed a call to 911 as well, in which he chillingly stated, "I shot my wife." When officers arrived at the home, they reportedly found that the actor's spouse, April, had already succumbed to the 3 gunshot wounds she had previously sustained. The Los Angeles District Attorney's Office later reported that Jace had become enraged at his wife after she had expressed her desire for a divorce. The actor reportedly believed that April was having an affair, and in a jealous rage, he shot her once in the back and twice in the legs. The shooting took place in front of the couple's 2 young sons. Jace was consequently arrested and charged with his wife's killing. 2 years later, he was found guilty of second-degree murder and sentenced to 40 years to life in prison. Number 7. Shailene Woodley. California-born actress Shailene Woodley rose to prominence by starring in the lead role of the teen drama series The Secret Life of the American Teenager from 2008 to 2013. Her television success was followed by a burgeoning movie career with appearances in films such as The Descendants, The Spectacular Now, and The Fault in Our Stars. Woodley established herself as a mainstream draw, started in 2014, when she portrayed the protagonist of the Divergent franchise, a trilogy of science fiction films based on a series of young adult novels. Beyond her acting prowess, Woodley's celebrity status is also characterized by her fervent environmental activism. In October of 2016, she took part in a protest against the construction of the Dakota Access Pipeline in Standing Rock, North Dakota. While she was live streaming the event on Facebook, Woodley was arrested by police officers after refusing to vacate the construction site. Her mother continued to record as the actress was taken away in a patrol car. Court records indicated that Woodley was charged with trespassing and engaging in a riot, to which she pleaded not guilty. She ultimately agreed to a plea bargain that sentenced her to 1 year of unsupervised probation. Number 6. YG. At about 4 a.m. on January the 24th of 2020, rapper Keenan Daquan Ray Jackson, better known by the stage name YG, was served an arrest warrant at his residence in the Chatsworth neighborhood of Los Angeles. He was then booked into the men's central jail on robbery charges that reportedly stemmed from local police's ongoing investigation into a previous incident. Jackson posted his $250,000 bail before going on to perform at the 2020 Grammy Awards just 2 days later, along with a group of other hip-hop artists and musicians including Roddy Ricch, Meek Mill, and DJ Khaled. Jackson helped pay tribute to slain rapper Nipsey Hussle by performing a pair of commemorative songs titled Letter to Nipsey and Higher. Jackson released his debut single under the name YG in 2010, which led to him signing a record deal with Def Jam Recordings. He's since released 6 studio albums, including a collaborative project with fellow California-born rapper Mozzie in 2021. Number 5. Renee Graziano. One of the stars of the VH1 reality television series Mob Wives had a run-in with the law in January of 2022. According to subsequent reports on the incident, Renee Graziano, whose father Anthony formerly served as a consigliere of the Bonanno crime family, crashed her car into a parked SUV in Staten Island, New York, shortly after 10 p.m. on the 4th of the month. The force of the collision caused Graziano's vehicle to flip over, but she avoided any serious injury in the accident. Upon the arrival of law enforcement, the 52-year-old climbed out of her car and allegedly began speaking incoherently to the responding officers. She was taken to a hospital to undergo a medical examination, after which she was transported to a nearby police precinct and charged with operating a motor vehicle while impaired by drugs. Graziano reportedly told the police that she'd taken Adderall earlier on the day of the incident, and it later emerged that the reality TV star had been battling substance abuse for some time. It was reported that Graziano's substance dependency was connected to her depression. Her mental health had been affected ever since the 2016 death of one of her Mob Wives co-stars, Angela Raiola, who on the show was often referred to as Big Ange. Graziano appeared on the British reality series Celebrity Big Brother in 2016, reportedly finishing in 3rd in the show's 18th season. Number 4. Vic Mensa. Upon his return from a trip to Africa on January the 15th of 2022, Chicago-born rapper Vic Mensa was arrested at the Washington Dulles International Airport. U.S. Customs and Border Protection officials reportedly found that the 28-year-old had various substances, including LSD and psilocybin mushrooms, capsules and gummies, in his possession. Following the discovery of the drugs during a secondary set of screenings, Mensa was taken into custody and charged with felony narcotics possession. According to an Instagram post uploaded by Mensa's frequent collaborator, Chance the Rapper, the musician had been released from custody as of January the 18th. Mensa himself confirmed rumors of his release with a pair of Twitter posts that same day, one of which read, "Wow, what a trip." Mensa co-founded the Save Money Save Life Foundation, a non-profit initiative that seeks to use art and entertainment to advocate for sustainable change, specifically in the city of Chicago. Mensa's emergence within the hip-hop scene was cemented when he was selected to appear on the cover of XXL magazine's freshman class of 2014. Number 3. 50 Cent. Curtis James Jackson III, who achieved global fame under the stage name 50 Cent, first gained mainstream attention in the early 2000s as the de facto leader of the East Coast hip-hop group G-Unit. His multi-platinum debut studio album, Get Rich or Die Trying, was partially produced by two of the most well-known figures in hip-hop at the time, Dr. Dre and Eminem. Prior to his massively successful rap career, however, Jackson grew up in the South Jamaica neighborhood of Queens, New York, where he began selling illegal substances as early as the age of 12. His various drug-related arrests led to him being sentenced to 3 to 9 years in prison in the mid-1990s, although he only ended up serving 6 months at a boot camp, where he earned the equivalency of a high school diploma. Jackson faced further legal problems in 2002 when he and 4 members of his entourage were taken into police custody in the early morning hours of December the 31st. Officers reportedly searched the rapper's car, which was parked outside of a Manhattan nightclub, due to the vehicle's tinted windows. Inside, they discovered a pair of handguns, and Jackson was consequently charged with 2 counts of criminal possession of a weapon. In the summer of 2013, Jackson was arrested for allegedly assaulting his then-girlfriend, model and actress Daphne Joy, at her Los Angeles residence before ransacking her bedroom following an argument between them. He was charged with 1 count of domestic violence and 4 counts of vandalism, to which he initially pleaded not guilty. Jackson ultimately agreed to a plea deal which ordered him to 3 years of probation and 30 days of community service. Number 2. Devin Ratray. Devin Ratray rose to prominence as a child actor during the 1990s, playing Buzz McAllister in the first 2 entries of the popular Home Alone franchise. In the years since, Ratray has gotten steady work as a supporting actor in various movies and television shows, including the Oscar-nominated comedy drama Nebraska and the critically acclaimed indie thriller Blue Ruin. In December of 2021, Ratray was invited to make a guest appearance at the 2-day OKC Pop Christmas Con in Oklahoma City. According to a police report, the actor and his girlfriend were drinking at a bar on the night of December the 8th, when they got into a heated argument. The dispute reportedly stemmed from the fact that the woman had agreed to give away Ratray's autograph to a pair of fans for free. When the couple went back to their hotel room later that night, they started fighting again. As tensions escalated, Ratray allegedly pushed his girlfriend onto the bed and attempted to strangle her, telling her, "This is how you die." The victim was reportedly found with various injuries, including bruises on her face, chest, and arm. Ratray denied having ever laid a hand on her in the incident's aftermath. The 44-year-old actor did ultimately surrender to the authorities, and he was subsequently charged with domestic assault and battery. Number 1. Shelley Malil. In 2005, actor Shelley Malil got his breakout role as a supporting character in the hit Steve Carell-led comedy The 40-Year-Old Virgin. He also made appearances on popular television series such as Scrubs, Reba, The West Wing, and NYPD Blue. On August 10th of 2008, Malil's girlfriend, Kendra Beebe, was talking with a friend on the back patio of her home in San Marcos, California, when the 44-year-old actor arrived and immediately began attacking her with a knife. When Beebe tried to flee, Malil pursued her, reportedly using a broken wine glass and a kitchen knife to stab her repeatedly. He also attempted to smother her with a pillow during the course of his violent outburst. Malil was reportedly arrested the following day as he got off a train in Oceanside. Bibi miraculously survived his onslaught, but was left with 23 deep puncture stab wounds, a severe laceration on her chin, collapsed lungs, and the loss of roughly half the blood in her body. Malil was ultimately convicted on charges of attempted murder and assault with a deadly weapon. He was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 12 years. In 2018, however, he was granted parole 4 years early. In his initial interviews with the police and during his criminal trial, Malil claimed that the incident had been an unfortunate case of mistaken identity and that he'd believed his girlfriend to be an intruder when he assaulted her. The actor later amended his recounting of the incident while appearing in front of the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation panel. Malil then admitted to premeditating the attack because he'd felt slighted by Bibi during an earlier interaction. According to the San Diego Union Tribune, Malil also stated that he'd gone to his girlfriend's home that day with the intent to annihilate her.
Number 6. Andre Zachary Rebello. In November of 2022, wealthy cryptocurrency dealer and business manager Andre Zachary Rebello was arrested following an investigation into his mother's death 2 years earlier. The 26-year-old, who was in a high-profile relationship with Australian social media influencer Gracie Piscopo, was remanded into custody to face Sterling Gardens Magistrates Court on one count of murder as well as fraud charges related to the deadly crime. Back on May the 25th of 2020, 58-year-old Colleen Rebello was found dead inside her multi-million-dollar home in the Perth suburb of Bicton. Her death hadn't initially been considered suspicious, as her body didn't present with obvious signs of injury. However, investigators uncovered that Rebello had forged his mother's will in the days following her demise, flouting her documented wishes to have her body buried to instead have her cremated, thus destroying crucial evidence that could have revealed her manner of death. The man was accused of falsifying other records pertaining to his mother as well, including in requests for information and a death certificate. It was also detailed how his charges were, at least in part, linked to attempted life insurance fraud. Following her partner's arrest, Piscopo publicly indicated she was in utter disbelief about the allegations against him, which she said had deeply affected her and the couple's 3-year-old son. Number 5. Gleidson Acacio dos Santos. In the summer of 2021, Brazilian authorities began investigating a cryptocurrency investment firm run by Gleidson Acacio dos Santos. Through his lucrative operation, dos Santos obtained generational wealth that allowed him to lead a lavish lifestyle, including a sizable collection of luxury cars and high-end watches. However, when investigators started taking a closer look at dos Santos' dealings, suspicions began to arise. In August of 2021, Brazil's federal police conducted a raid of the company's business compound, wherein they seized many of the man's expensive personal belongings, along with $28.7 million in cryptocurrencies and approximately $3 million in cash. The considerable confiscation was reported as the largest crypto seizure in the nation's history. Dos Santos was playfully dubbed the Bitcoin Pharaoh after it emerged that his company was nothing more than a highly profitable pyramid scheme with which he'd conned more than 122,000 investors out of their money. He and 4 co-conspirators were arrested in one of Rio de Janeiro's most expensive neighborhoods following the raid. Then in December of 2021, reports surfaced that Dos Santos and his associates were being charged in connection to a murder plot targeting the man's crypto rival, Nilson Alves da Silva. The latter, who was 44 at the time, had been shot twice while stopped at a red light earlier that year on March the 20th. Da Silva was taken to the hospital, and although he was initially pronounced to be in critical condition, he ultimately pulled through and survived. Investigators determined that the attempted hit had been put out after Da Silva began to spread rumors about Dos Santos' imminent arrest. The various charges levied against the former cryptocurrency magnate were still pending in Brazilian court as of the latest updates. Number 4. Aurea Vasquez Rios. On September the 22nd of 2005, millionaire real estate developer Adam Anghang
was leaving the Pink Skirt nightclub in Old San Juan, Puerto Rico, when he was suddenly stabbed and beaten to death in the middle of the street. At the time of the attack, An Hang had been accompanied by his estranged wife, Aurea Vasquez Rios, who sustained only minor injuries. In the immediate aftermath, local authorities zeroed in on 22-year-old Jonathan Romain Rivera, a dishwasher at the club, as their prime suspect. An Hang had purchased the pink skirt as a gift to his wife, so Rivera was known to the victim and his family. As the investigation progressed, suspicions also fell upon Vasquez Rios herself, who stood to reap substantial financial benefits from her soon-to-be ex-husband's death. Rivera was convicted of murder and sentenced to 105 years in prison. However, an independent FBI investigation subsequently exonerated him and instead indicted Alex Babon Colon. It eventually emerged that Colon had been offered $3 million by Vasquez Rios to carry out An Hang's murder. Facing the inevitability of prosecution, Vasquez Rios fled jurisdiction to Italy. While abroad, the woman reportedly sued the parents of her dead husband, claiming they cheated her out of her rightful inheritance. Her case was ultimately dismissed, however, and in 2013 she was arrested in Spain. In court, prosecutors detailed how Vasquez Rios had directly communicated with Colon and other co-conspirators on and before the day of An Hang's murder. She, her sister, and her sister's ex-boyfriend were each found guilty of multiple counts, including conspiracy and the use of an interstate facility in murder for hire. In March of 2019, the U.S. Justice Department released a statement revealing that Vasquez Rios had been sentenced to life in prison for the crime. Number 3. Ed Buck. Ohio-born businessman Ed Buck was arrested in 2019 following a series of suspicious incidents at his home in West Hollywood, California. After beginning his career as a model and actor in Europe, Buck worked for a friend's data service company, which he subsequently bought out of bankruptcy and renamed Gopher Courier. 5 years after the purchase, Buck sold Gopher Courier for a significant profit. Now a millionaire, Buck shifted his focus to the political sphere, leading the effort to recall Arizona Governor Evan Meacham from office over allegations of racism and corruption. According to the Arizona Republic, the anti-Meacham campaign made Buck a household name in Arizona politics in the late 1980s. He subsequently relocated to West Hollywood, where he unsuccessfully ran for city council in 2007. The millionaire largely stayed out of the headlines in subsequent years until a young African-American man named Gemel Moore was found dead at his apartment in July of 2017. Emergency crews came upon Moore, an escort, lying naked on a mattress in Buck's living room with an adult film playing on the television. The police uncovered adult toys, syringes, and plastic bags filled with what was suspected to be methamphetamine at the residence. Although the LA County Coroner's report placed Buck at the scene of Moore's death, the district attorney declined to prosecute him. When news of the incident surfaced, rumors began to circulate regarding Buck's alleged history of luring young black gay men to his apartment, where he would inject them with methamphetamine for his own twisted gratification. In January of 2019, another African-American man, identified as 55-year-old adult film actor Timothy Michael Dean, was found dead in Buck's home under similar circumstances as Moore before him. The following September, Buck was taken into police custody and charged with 3 counts of battery causing serious injury, administering methamphetamine, and maintaining a drug house. The arrest occurred after a 37-year-old man was injected with meth at Buck's residence but fortunately survived. In April of 2022, having been convicted of 9 federal charges, Buck was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Number 2. Peter Chadwick. The lives of an affluent family from Newport Beach, California, were irreparably destroyed one day in October of 2012. Real estate developer Peter Chadwick, who'd earned millions of dollars during the course of his professional career, hadn't picked up his sons from the bus stop after school, nor had his wife of 21 years, Ki Cho. The following morning, Peter got in contact with San Diego authorities, telling them Quicho had been murdered by a house painter named Juan, who'd subsequently forced him to remove his wife's body from their house, which rested within a purportedly secure, gated community. Law enforcement immediately found Peter's story suspicious, and after further investigation, he was arrested on suspicion of committing the murder himself. Upon being freed on a $1 million bond, Peter fled south to Mexico, where he remained on the run for several years. According to official reports on his time as a fugitive, the man used a number of aliases to avoid recognition, including the name Paul Cook. He moved from small town to small town until eventually settling in the city of Pátzcuaro, 4 hours west of Mexico City, where he bought a condo and found a job. To explain his solitude, Peter claimed that his family had been on board the infamous Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 that disappeared in 2014. In May of 2016, he was involved in a car crash that claimed the life of a local woman named Claudia Soto and left her sister in a coma for 15 days. Although he wasn't ultimately found to have been criminally liable for the deadly accident, Peter left Pátzcuaro in the aftermath, fleeing to a town called Valle de Bravo. Shortly thereafter, however, the man saw an investigative report on TV detailing the U.S. Marshals' attempts to locate him. Panicked by the news of the escalating manhunt, Peter skipped town once again. In August of 2019, he was finally tracked down by the authorities after nearly 5 years on the run. He later pleaded guilty to strangling and drowning his wife, following an argument over the possibility of divorce. In February of 2022, then 57-year-old Peter was sentenced to 15 years to life behind bars. Number 1. Andrew Rodriguez. A self-described multi-six-figure earner from New Braunfels, Texas, was arrested for running over a man on a moped on the night of June the 5th of 2021. 34-year-old Andrew Rodriguez, who reportedly earned his millions through cryptocurrency investments, had gone to Las Vegas to celebrate his birthday. While driving to a party with his fiancée, 24-year-old Sabrina Junga, in the passenger seat of his Lamborghini Huracan, Rodriguez reached speeds of up to 141 miles per hour. As he blazed down Russell Road near Decatur Boulevard, the man slammed into the back of a moped being ridden by 58-year-old Walter J. Anderson. The impact of the collision was such that Anderson was cut in half, with his torso reportedly landing more than 200 feet away from the rest of his body. The moped was crushed beneath the Lamborghini. Upon the arrival of law enforcement, Rodriguez emerged from the wreckage and said, "I just killed someone." Although it's unclear whether Rodriguez was administered a sobriety test at the scene, officers immediately noted the smell of alcohol, as well as the fact that the man's eyes were watery and bloodshot. He subsequently faced a felony charge of DUI resulting in death, the second DUI on his record. Back in September of 2015, the self-made millionaire had been pulled over while driving drunk in El Paso, Texas. Rodriguez's Mercedes had expired tags, and he had trouble keeping his balance while speaking with the police. He later pleaded guilty to DUI, for which he was given a suspended 1-year jail sentence. His probationary period had concluded in January of 2019. For the fatal Las Vegas accident, Rodriguez was given a prison term of 6 to 20 years. Anderson's family expressed dissatisfaction with the punishment, claiming the drunk driver should have been charged with murder. Number 5. Anthony D. McClanahan. Anthony D. McClanahan spent 3 years at Washington State University, playing as a linebacker during the early 1990s, before being drafted by the Dallas Cowboys, an NFL team for which he never made an official appearance. McClanahan did go on to spend 4 years in the Canadian Football League as a starter for the Calgary Stampeders. In the early morning of November the 2nd of 2017, McClanahan was found by police officers in Park City, a small city in Utah known for its many ski resorts. On that morning, McClanahan was crawling outside on his stomach while covered in blood. He managed to flag down 2 police officers who initially believed he had been the victim of a violent crime. That's also the version of events that McClanahan went with, as he told the officers that he, along with his wife and baby, had been attacked. McClanahan's injuries turned out to be somewhat minor, and his problems started when police
did not find any evidence to back up his story of having been attacked. What they did find was his wife's body in the condominium that McClanahan had been renting. A month prior to the grisly discovery, McClanahan had been arrested on charges of kidnapping his 8-year-old son from a previous relationship, then traveling with him for 9 days before returning him and bonding himself out of jail a few days later. McClanahan's wife, Kerry McClanahan, had already been planning on leaving McClanahan on account of him physically abusing her, a decision that was reinforced by the man's antics in October. Despite that, she had decided to try and help him get back on his feet first. It was a course of action that ultimately cost the woman her life. A jealous and bitter McClanahan ended up stabbing her to death in his apartment, enraged by Kerry's plan of leaving him. His attempts to plead his innocence or reduce guilt by pointing to other attackers, faking a seizure, and faking memory loss from having played professional football all failed. In 2019, he finally admitted his guilt and was sentenced to life in prison. Number 4. Bruno Fernandes. In 2013, Bruno Fernandes was sentenced to 22 years in prison for the 2010 murder of his former mistress and the mother of his son, Elisa Samudio. The Brazilian goalkeeper, not to be confused with current Manchester United superstar midfielder Bruno Fernandes, had played for high-profile Brazilian club Flamengo between 2006 and 2010. During this time, he managed to win the National Club Championship in 2009. A year later, on June the 9th, during his last season with the club, his former mistress disappeared, shortly after having given birth to a son that she alleged was his, which Fernandes denied. Elisa Samudio went missing almost 8 months after she filed a police report against Fernandes and his longtime friend Luis Romao, nicknamed Spaghetti. In that report, she accused Fernandes, Spaghetti, and more of their friends of having kidnapped her and forced her to take medication to induce an abortion. They also allegedly beat her, and Fernandes was said to have pointed a gun at her head. When the forensic examination of the investigation was released in August of 2010, it was already too late. Samudio had disappeared at least 2 months prior. Investigations into that missing person case later found that Samudio had been lured into a trap. She and Fernandes had agreed to meet and discuss arrangements for child support, but instead she was picked up by Spaghetti and a cousin of Fernandes's who beat her up and kidnapped her. The cousin went on to confess that the victim was then handed off to Marcos Aparecido, a former policeman hired by Spaghetti to handle her killing. He did as instructed, and Samudio's body was never recovered. In 2013, Fernandes was found guilty of assassinating, kidnapping, and concealing the body of the 25-year-old woman and was sentenced to 22 years in prison. Subsequent events would unfold with remarkable leeway in how the soccer player served his punishment. In 2019, after having served less than half his sentence, Fernandes was released from prison to serve the remainder of his sentence under house arrest. The term house arrest was loosely applied, as Fernandes has since appeared in 13 games for Rio Branco, a team that plays in a lower, semi-professional Brazilian league. Number 3. Hope Solo. Goalkeeper Hope Solo was one of America's most famous and high-profile soccer stars, frequently ranked among the best American athletes overall, when she got arrested in the early morning of June the 24th of 2014. It was a turbulent arrest because an allegedly drunk Solo resisted police officers who were trying to take her into custody, calling one of them a bitch. She was also reported to have said, "You're scared of me because you know that if the handcuffs were off, I'd kick your ass." Teresa Robert, Solo's half-sister, and Roberts' son were the alleged victims in the domestic violence case against Solo. Initially, it had been Roberts' plan to convince prosecutors not to pursue charges. However, when Solo came out of jail and in an interview accused Roberts' 17-year-old son of being the aggressor, she changed her mind and wanted justice. According to her version of events, a drunk Solo had showed up at their house and had gotten worse over the next few hours before physically attacking her son. The son managed to restrain Solo and Robert told him to let go, which he did. Afterwards, Solo resumed her attack on the teenager, jumped on top of him, and started bashing his head into the cement floor inside their garage. When Robert came from behind to help her son, she managed to get Solo off, but the athlete then turned on her and started punching her in the face repeatedly. Solo appeared in court several times until after several delays in 2018, both cases of domestic violence were eventually dismissed. It was because the half-sister and her son decided they didn't want to be witnesses in the case anymore due to the toll that the case had taken on them throughout the years. Number 2. Tonya Harding. On January the 6th of 1994, American figure skater Nancy Kerrigan had just completed a practice session at the Detroit Cobra Arena. She was hanging out in the corridors of the arena when, out of nowhere, she was hit on her leg with a 21-inch collapsible baton, the other end of which was held by Shane Stant. 8 days after the attack, which had been meant to destroy Kerrigan's kneecaps, Stant turned himself in and confessed to his crime. The attack later turned out to have been orchestrated by the ex-husband of Kerrigan's longtime rival, Tonya Harding. Just before Christmas, a few weeks earlier, Stant had had a meeting with Jeff Gillooly, Harding's ex-husband, and Sean Eckhart, Harding's bodyguard. In that meeting, Gillooly and Eckhart offered Stant $6,500 to kneecap Kerrigan, to which he agreed. Even though the attack took place right before the American Figure Skating Championships, the end goal of it was to prevent Kerrigan from competing in the 1994 Winter Olympics. Kerrigan, who was hurt, bruised and battered, had to withdraw from the national championship, but recovered quickly enough to partake in the 1994 Olympics. She managed to secure second place, with Harding finishing in 8th place. Later on, Harding was directly linked to the attack and, in the aftermath, was stripped of her 1994 national championship title and banned for life. Stant was sentenced to 18 months in prison. His uncle, Derek Smith, who had connected him with Gillooly and Eckhart while also acting as the getaway driver, was, like his nephew, sentenced to 18 months. Jeff Gillooly was sentenced to 2 years after confessing, and Sean Eckhart was sentenced to 18 months in prison. Harding herself worked out a deal with prosecutors that allowed her to plead guilty to lesser charges than having co-orchestrated the attack, which she'd been suspected of doing. She got 3 years of probation, a $100,000 fine, and 500 hours of community service. Her legal troubles were not completely over just yet. In the years after her guilty plea, Harding was arrested twice more for driving under the influence. Number 1. Clayton Whitmore. In 2010, Clayton Whitmore helped his New Hartford High School Spartans capture a second straight Division II state championship. Shortly after clinching the division, Whitmore was even honored by the New York State High School Hockey Coaches Association as the state's Division II Player of the Year. He was considered a promising hockey star, and his future was looking bright. A mere 2 years later, Whitmore found himself in prison. He was accused of the murder of his 18-year-old girlfriend, Alexandra Kogut, who had been found dead in her dorm room at SUNY Brockport a few hours earlier, on September the 29th of 2012. Alexandra, like Whitmore, had been a promising young athlete, captaining her local swim team. When he was arrested at a thruway rest stop near Syracuse, Whitmore was 21 years old and playing hockey for Utica College. Kogut had been found with extensive trauma to the upper body. Whitmore initially denied the second-degree murder charge and having anything to do with her death at all. He was soon forced to change his story due to the overwhelming evidence against him. On the night that she was murdered, Kogut had tweeted about how excited she was to see Whitmore again. Her words started to have an ominous connotation, as in a subsequent tweet she wrote, "Should have known." An apparently ordinary argument about stupid stuff between the pair soon turned violent, and the two started shoving each other, according to Whitmore's version of events. In court, he declared that she kept pushing him, at which point he snapped and kept hitting her with his fists over and over again. He then testified that her breathing became irregular and she was starting to make gurgling sounds. Whitmore decided he did not want the girl he loved to suffer, and he grabbed a curling iron, which he used to end her life. In an attempt to get the murder charge downgraded to a manslaughter charge, Whitmore claimed that he had been physically and emotionally abused by his father growing up, something to which his sister testified. The jury would not be swayed, especially after it became clear that he'd been aggressive with some of his exes too. It took the jury under 2 hours to arrive at a guilty verdict, and Whitmore was sentenced to 25 to life.
Number 4. Clara Kraber. The 20-year-old daughter of an affluent New York City family was arrested in September of 2020 for participating in political riots that resulted in an estimated $100,000 in damages. The destructive riots, which originated as fairly peaceful demonstrations, had reportedly unfolded in protest to the death of Daniel Prude, who'd passed away during an encounter with police in upstate New York on March 23rd of 2020. Clara Kraber, a student at Rice University in Texas, was one of the 8 individuals taken into custody after police had intervened to break up the riots. The protesters had allegedly smashed store windows with bricks, ignited trash can fires, and plastered graffiti on various buildings throughout the city's Upper East Side. In a notebook that was later confiscated by the authorities, Kraber had expressed her desire for the United States to undergo a process of wealth redistribution. She had also detailed plans to occupy vacant luxury apartments around the city by staging break-ins with the help of locksmiths. The young woman had reportedly cited the likes of political figures such as Joseph Stalin and Leon Trotsky as the inspirations for her worldview. Following their arrest, the protesters were charged with felony rioting, in addition to other related weapons and burglary offenses. Kraber became the subject of widespread criticism when the details of her arrest surfaced online. Her detractors viewed her actions as hypocritical, given the discrepancy between her ideology and her family's considerable wealth. Number 5. Lorena Daniela Aguirre. In a viral YouTube video from 2016, a Mexican teen was shown attempting to bribe police officers after she drunkenly crashed her car into multiple parked vehicles. The incident was filmed and uploaded by a man named David Villa. After the video was widely disseminated on social media, the young woman, identified as 18-year-old Lorena Daniela Aguirre, became known online as Lady 100 Pesos. The nickname was a reference to the sum of money equivalent to about $5 she'd allegedly offered to officers at the scene. On April the 21st of 2016, Aguirre had gotten behind the wheel of her Nissan Rogue while she was intoxicated. She then plowed the SUV into several cars that had been parked on the street in the city of Guanajuato. As the responding officers attempted to take the drunk driver into custody, she reportedly offered them the aforementioned sum in exchange for them letting her go. Throughout the video, Aguirre had her cash and credit cards in hand as she desperately and fruitlessly tried to persuade the police to release her. The young woman had been in a car with 2 male companions, one of whom was reported as being the son of a local politician, although it wasn't made clear whether Aguirre was actually wealthy. She'd evidently attempted to convey the illusion that she had enough money to make granting her release worthwhile for the authorities. Nevertheless, she spent the night in jail and was ordered to pay a fine that was reportedly 5 times more than the amount she'd been offering to the officers. Number 4. Yun Lucy Lu Lee and Oliver Carafa. A wealthy Instagram influencer and her boyfriend were arrested on murder charges in June of 2021 after they'd spent 3 months on the run. Yun Lucy Lu Lee and Oliver Carafa, a couple that the media dubbed the Millennial Bonnie and Clyde, were tracked down by the authorities and apprehended in the Hungarian capital of Budapest. They were alleged to have carried out the fatal shooting of their business associate Tyler Pratt in Ontario, Canada, a few months prior. Lee and Carafa had also been accused of attempting to murder Pratt's pregnant girlfriend in the fatal altercation, which reportedly erupted during a business meeting. Although the female victim ultimately survived the gunfire, she was forced to terminate her pregnancy after being hospitalized in the incident's aftermath. Within 24 hours of the shooting, the perpetrators fled to Eastern Europe, first arriving in Carafa's native Slovakia before making their way to Hungary. It was reported that Lee belonged to a wealthy Canadian family with ties to prominent figures in the country's Liberal Party. Carafa had previously spent 5 years in prison after he'd been found guilty in connection to a fatal car accident while driving under the influence of alcohol. Number 3. Saki Sudo. In an autobiography published in 2016, Japanese millionaire Kosuke Nozaki boasted about how he'd spent roughly $26 million over his lifetime in his attempts to court a total of 4,000 women. The 77-year-old real estate mogul also reportedly wrote that his only motivation for making money was to use his wealth to aid him in his pursuit of attractive women. In 2018, Nozaki married a former adult film actress by the name of Saki Sudo. The businessman claimed that they'd first met at an airport when Sudo, who was 22 years old at the time, had helped him to his feet after he'd fallen to the ground. Nozaki had allegedly told the young woman that she would be his final romantic partner, a prediction that came to grim fruition only a few months into their marriage. On May the 24th of 2018, Nozaki was found dead at his Wakayama residence, and it was initially believed that the elderly man had passed away of natural causes. In April of 2021, however, Sudo was taken into custody on suspicion of fatally poisoning her late husband. It had emerged that the couple were eating dinner together around the time of Nozaki's death, and a toxicology report on the man's corpse indicated the presence of a lethal stimulant in his system. Upon reviewing the widowed woman's internet search history, investigators learned that she'd researched the same stimulant drug that was later linked to Nozaki's death. Sudo stood to inherit a sizable portion of the millionaire's fortune before her suspected involvement in the man's death came to light. Number 2. The Couch family. In December of 2013, a teenager who'd killed 4 people while driving under the influence was handed down a controversially lenient punishment by a Texas judge. The fatal collision had occurred in the city of Burleson on June the 15th of that same year. Ethan Couch, aged 16, had allegedly gotten behind the wheel of a pickup while he was intoxicated. He then proceeded to speed through a residential area when he lost control of the truck and crashed into a group of people who'd been assisting another motorist who had car trouble. The accident resulted in 4 deaths and 9 injuries, and Couch was consequently indicted on 4 counts of intoxication manslaughter. During the ensuing criminal trial, the defense argued that the teen suffered from a supposed psychological condition called affluenza. Couch's legal team claimed that the boy couldn't bear the responsibility for his actions due to the fact that his affluent upbringing had led to him possessing no understanding of boundaries or consequences. Although affluenza is not a medically recognized disease, Couch's lawyers convinced Judge Gene Hudson Boyd to spare the teenager any jail time and instead sentence him to 10 years of probation. It also emerged that Couch's parents, Fred and Tonya, had had several run-ins with the law themselves prior to their son's conviction, including one instance in which they were accused of driving another car off the road. Fred, who'd made millions of dollars from his sheet metal manufacturing business, had been charged with assault in connection to a domestic abuse incident involving Tonya, whom he later divorced. Judge Boyd's decision in Ethan Couch's case sparked outrage among those who considered it to be unjustly merciful towards the teen. Couch was detained once again in December of 2015 after he'd failed to report to his probation officer. He and his mother were eventually located in the Mexican resort city of Puerto Vallarta, and the young man subsequently spent 2 years in prison. In January of 2020, he allegedly committed an additional probation violation by failing a mandatory drug test. Number 1. Ashton Sachs. In the late 1990s, Ashton Sachs was born into an affluent family from Orange County, California. His mother, Andra, had built a prosperous real estate business worth upwards of $80 million, and the 5 Sachs children therefore wanted for nothing. On February the 9th of 2014, however, 19-year-old Sachs carried out the murder of both of his parents at their multi-million-dollar mansion in San Juan Capistrano. The teen had reportedly driven 20 hours from Seattle, Washington to Southern California in order to commit the cold-blooded double homicide. Investigators later established that he'd walked through the unlocked front door of his parents' residence before fatally shooting them in their bedroom. Sachs went on to fire shots at 2 of his younger siblings. His brother was left paralyzed as a result of the attack, while his sister narrowly avoided a bullet to the head while hiding under her bed sheets. In the immediate aftermath of the incident, Sachs fully cooperated with detectives as they attempted to track down his parents' killer. The young man had reportedly attempted to confuse the investigation by giving the authorities the names of former business partners and other individuals who may have sought to harm his family. The police soon identified Sachs as a suspect due to mounting evidence against him, and he ultimately confessed less than a month after the shooting had taken place. When investigators asked him what his motive for the violent crime had been, Sachs blamed his parents for his depression and expressed his belief that he'd been their least favorite child. In October of 2016, he was sentenced to 2 life sentences without the possibility of parole. Number 7. Riley Higgins. The 23-year-old son of an Australian millionaire was arrested following an armed robbery which occurred on August the 17th of 2022 at a gas station in Avalon on Sydney's northern beaches. CCTV footage showed a masked suspect holding up the establishment with what was later determined to have been an air rifle. The gunman was identified as Riley Higgins, an aspiring rapper, and the son of Peter Higgins, the millionaire co-founder of the mortgage broking firm Mortgage Choice. Higgins threatened the station attendant before making off with roughly $400 in cash.
He was subsequently arrested and charged with robbery while armed with a dangerous weapon. His mother, Rebecca, worked as a registered clinical counselor and psychotherapist. She reported during the consequent legal proceedings that Higgins had undergone mental health treatment from a young age after being diagnosed with attention deficit disorder, a mood disorder, and oppositional defiant disorder. Rebecca added that her son was also dealing with an addiction to drugs and alcohol. As of October 2022, Higgins was granted bail and set to undergo a 3-month treatment program at a center north of Sydney while awaiting trial for the armed robbery. Number 6. Stephanie Scolaro. 26-year-old Stephanie Scolaro was arrested by London law enforcement on March the 8th of 2017 for running a business that illegally imported endangered python skin fashion accessories to the UK. Scolaro's mother hailed from Britain while her father was Italian mining magnate Francesco Scolaro. When news of her arrest broke, local media referred to her as a rich kid of Instagram, as she regularly traveled on private planes to her family's properties in Monaco, New York, and Ibiza, posting about her experiences for her over 100,000 followers. Scolaro sold snakeskin bags and baseball caps on the social media platform and through her website SS Python, as well as several London-based boutiques. The young woman, who also worked as a swimsuit model, was arrested on the same day that customs officials seized her illegal products at Heathrow Airport. The police seized 35 caps along with a snakeskin bag, which were valued at over $18,000. Specimens of python leather were also found at Scolaro's luxury home in Parkview Residences, Marylebone. Law enforcement also discovered 2 forged importation certificates which Scolaro's defense would later argue was evidence that the young woman had been scammed by Indonesian snake farmers. She eventually admitted 2 counts of importing goods with the intent to evade a prohibition, 2 counts of keeping for sale a species acquired unlawfully, and 2 counts of selling a species unlawfully imported. She was spared jail and in January of 2019 given a 12-month community order requiring her to carry out 160 hours of unpaid work. The sentencing judge had harsh words for Scolaro, describing her as utterly self-centered and mentally removed from the reality of her crimes by having always been given what she wanted. Scolaro maintained that she hadn't known pythons were endangered or that animal cruelty was basically the backbone of her business. Scolaro also claimed that the Wildlife Crime Unit was using her as an advertising campaign because of her social standing, adding, "It's not as if I killed a snake." Number 5. King Harris. King Harris, the oldest son of rapper Clifford T.I. and singer-songwriter Tamika "Tiny" Harris, was arrested in Atlanta, Georgia in late August of 2022. The full circumstances of the arrest weren't disclosed, but they were reported to have been centered on 18-year-old Harris not wearing a seatbelt. His attitude and lack of cooperation during the traffic stop were believed to have resulted in him being taken into custody. He later announced his release on social media in a post that also involved him cursing at the police. As his mugshot went viral, many internet users accused the teenage rapper, who performed as Kid Cyan, of trying to act like a gangster. His behavior was found particularly unsavory given the fact that he enjoyed a comfortable and privileged lifestyle primarily due to his parents' success. Harris later replied to his critics on social media while taking a bubble bath. He agreed that he shouldn't be getting arrested, claiming he was too rich for it. Harris also noted that his behavior had nothing to do with acting tough, adding, "I ain't asked for the police to pull me over." T.I. also replied to fan concerns on social media and claimed that he recognized the energy in his son, insisting that he was a good kid, chasing after the wrong things before concluding that time was going to be his teacher. T.I. himself had a long history of legal troubles, with the most recent accusation also involving his wife, Tiny. By 2021, more than 30 women had come forward alleging that the couple and their associates had drugged, kidnapped, and abused them in at least 2 states, including California and Georgia. Number 4. Alexandra Jane Jackson.
Alexandra Jane Jackson, daughter of country music icon Alan Jackson, was arrested in Nashville, Tennessee in August of 2013. Local police had observed a Range Rover speeding and conducted a traffic stop. 20-year-old Jackson, who was in the passenger seat, became irate as an officer spoke to the SUV's driver. She got out and her anger grew when the officer requested that she return to the car. Upon being warned that failure to follow the command would result in her arrest, Jackson, who appeared to be intoxicated at the time, struck the officer in the chest. She then resisted arrest to such an extent that the officer had to call for backup. After she was finally restrained, Jackson told the arresting officer that her father would do anything she wanted, but was promptly warned about any bribery attempt. She was charged with assault, underage drinking, and resisting arrest. Jackson eventually took a plea deal that saw her perform community service as well as take alcohol safety and anger management courses. Number 3. Sarah and Claire Bronfman. Following an expose by the New York Times, the United States Attorney for the Eastern District of New York investigated a multi-level self-help company called NXIVM and brought charges to several of its leading members in 2018. While on the surface, the organization provided seminars supposedly promoting human potential development, it had a secret branch called DOS, short for Dominus Obsequious Sororium, which loosely translates for Master over the Slave Women. It encouraged female masters to recruit slaves for NXIVM leader Keith Raniere, who was the only male member of the secret society. Roughly 150 women joined DOS, after being led to believe it was an empowering, women-only organization. In reality, they were forced to act as Raniere's private slaves and ceremonially branded with his initials via cauterizing pen. To ensure obedience, they were forced to provide collateral such as explicit videos and photos, compromising information, or rights to personal assets. They were sleep deprived, verbally demeaned, corporally punished, and forced to undergo restrictive diets or perform labor as a means of submitting to Raniere's control. Several whistleblowers came forward denouncing NXIVM and DOS, resulting in the arrest of Raniere, who was ultimately sentenced to 120 years in prison. Two of his accomplices were Claire and Sarah Bronfman, daughters of Seagram billionaire Edgar Bronfman Sr. Sarah had joined NXIVM in 2001 and persuaded Claire to do the same the following year. The heiresses, both in their 20s at the time, became committed followers and financial backers of Raniere's. They relocated to upstate New York to work as NXIVM trainers and introduced their father to the organization. Edgar distanced himself from it after learning that Claire had given Raniere a $2 million loan. Claire would go on to spend roughly $150 million on the organization. Following a conflict with her father, she installed keylogger software on his computer, allowing NXIVM members to access it. Forbes magazine featured Raniere on its cover in 2003, calling him the world's strangest executive coach, with the accompanying article quoting Edgar describing NXIVM as a cult. As Moore shared that same viewpoint, Raniere formed the World Ethical Foundation's consortium, seeking to distance himself from the cult leader label. Sarah and Claire were successful in bringing the Dalai Lama to its inaugural event held in 2009 in Albany. Years later, it emerged that Sarah had been intimate with Tenzin Dondin, the Dalai Lama's gatekeeper, who'd arranged the appearance and who, as a monk, had taken a vow of celibacy. Following her arrest for NXIVM-related activity, Claire pleaded guilty to conspiracy to conceal and harbor illegal aliens for financial gain and fraudulent use of identification. She was sentenced to 6 years and 9 months in prison in 2020. In January of that same year, she and Sarah were named as defendants in a civil lawsuit filed in federal court by 80 former NXIVM members who accused them of fraud and abuse. Number 2. Lindsay Knickerbocker. On February the 13th of 2022, the daughter of a well-known reality TV star was arrested for methamphetamine possession and forgery in Arkansas. 33-year-old Lindsay Knickerbocker was stopped near a motel in Crittenden County after law enforcement noticed that her license plate light was out. When officers searched her vehicle, they found 4 grams of meth, over $2,000 in counterfeit money, 2 forged checks, and a device to print more. Knickerbocker's mother, Tammy, had starred on season 2 and 3 of The Real Housewives of Orange County. It was only after the police received a call from TMZ that they realized the woman's celebrity ties. In her mugshot, Knickerbocker looked drastically different from her red carpet photos or past TV appearances. The dramatic change was speculated to have been a consequence of her meth addiction. Although her latest arrest arguably had the most serious implications she'd faced up to that point, it hadn't been the first. In 2013, she was spotted driving erratically and hitting several parked cars on Balboa Island in California. With the police in tow, the then 23-year-old fled to a friend's house. When law enforcement arrived at the address, Knickerbocker resisted arrest by punching an officer in the stomach. Her blood alcohol level was found to have been 0.32, which was a life-threatening 4 times over the legal limit. Knickerbocker was given 3 years probation, ordered to perform community services, and undergo a first offender alcohol program. Number 1. Samuel Earl Rich. In the early morning hours of August the 13th of 2021, a young Tennessee woman was shot in the head at the Shelbyville home she shared with her boyfriend. The bullet went under 21-year-old Hannah Grace Perryman's left eye and exited from under her left ear. Following an investigation, the shooter was identified as Samuel Earl Rich, the son of a prominent Bedford County judge. After firing at her, he reportedly stood over Perriman's body to make sure she was dead. Miraculously, the woman survived. After Richard fled, she was airlifted to a hospital and underwent life-saving surgery that left her with some bullet fragments still embedded in her face. It would emerge that a few hours before the attack on Perriman, Richard gunned down her boyfriend, 22-year-old James William Warner. He was found abandoned near the intersection of Delaware Avenue and 35th Avenue North in Nashville, and it was determined that he'd been fatally shot 4 times. The judge's son would also later be charged with stealing his 2021 Jeep Grand Cherokee, cash and ID. 25-year-old Rich surrendered to the authorities within a few days of the 2 shooting incidents after being placed on the Tennessee Bureau of Investigation's Most Wanted list. During the trial that followed, an agent for the TBI revealed that Rich had tried to hire a hitman while he was behind bars. He'd hoped that the prospective assassin could kill Perriman with an overdose and make it look like an accident. Convinced that the case against him would fall apart without her, in recorded jailhouse phone calls, Rich was heard assuring the other man that he was a good guy and that he would pay him, mentioning his family's wealth and that his father was in the judicial system. In a victim impact statement read during the trial, Perriman revealed that in addition to various physical difficulties stemming from the shooting, she suffered from PTSD and constant panic attacks. She also described the emotional turmoil she'd experienced after learning that Warner, the love of her life, had been killed in cold blood. Rich was sentenced to the maximum of 59 years for the Perriman shooting after being found guilty of multiple offenses, including attempted first-degree murder, aggravated burglary, and weapons charges. His behavior in court indicated a lack of remorse as he was seen smiling and laughing at various times throughout the proceedings. Against his defense's wishes, he spoke during sentencing and revealed a possible motive. Rich claimed he'd been angry over a FaceTime call from March of 2019, during which someone had urinated on a bundle of letters from his dead grandmother. He apologized to Perriman and insisted he wasn't the animal he'd been made out to be. His trial for the Warner shooting was set for April of 2023. Thanks for watching. Would you rather lose your right to vote or lose your right to drive? Let us know in the comments section below.